Hello everybody and hi, my name is Kieran, and I'm having a donut and hot chocolate for breakfast today because fitness isn't a hobby, it's a lifestyle. And I wanted to spoil myself a little. That's the good stuff. Welcome to the first episode of Mental Health Mondays. I thought of this idea yesterday. It's very spontaneous, so maybe you'll never see this video. Maybe this will never see the light of day, but I think it will. I've wanted for a long time to talk about mental health in, these kinds of vlog formats. And I've always put it off because you need a certain amount of respect and appreciation when talking about serious issues like this. And I've always felt like I needed to make scripts, like I needed to write out what I was going to say, leave little room for ad-libbing, but I don't know. I think that this... Well, let me explain to you what the idea is here. The idea behind Mental Health Mondays as a show is I want to check in weekly, sort of a little weekly review of how I've been doing with my mental health. I want to talk about certain topics relating to mental health, answer questions, sort of take this time to be very raw and vulnerable and open and honest and talk about something that matters to me a lot, which is mental health and mental health awareness. And honestly, I don't have a clear-cut mission statement, but I got a vague idea and that's enough for me. For anyone who may not know me, my name is Kieran Schwartz. Hi, I'm 22, I'm Canadian, and I like long walks on the beach. I might start giving little bullet point scripts in the future. I've written down stuff on the back of my police check envelope here to try and keep some semblance of cohesion. I guess a good place to start with this would just be to talk about my history with mental health. We can sort of get on the same page. You can see where I'm coming from with all this. I have a list of my diagnoses here, and I'm going to try and go through them in the order that I think is least upsetting to most. First off is ADHD. It used to be that you could have ADHD or ADD, but they've combined it into one. So my diagnosis is what would have formerly been called attention deficit disorder, but my current diagnosis is attention deficit hyperactive disorder inattentive. Inattentive being the subtype. So I don't struggle as much with impulsivity and sort of outward expressions of being hyper energetic. It's a more discrete thing. So I'm still bouncing around a ton, but it's all in here. So my difficulties are mainly around focus, organization, planning, all the important parts of being a human being, adult in the world. I'm inattentive. I really struggle to focus. I've started taking drugs for it. Prescription. Your boy's popping Vyvanse. What up? And we are starting to, me and my therapist, consider that my ADHD might be having a bigger effect on other mental health issues and general daily struggles. It could be exacerbating other issues, which is very, very on brand for ADD and ADHD. A lot of people think of ADD and ADHD as being an innocent, harmless kind of mental illness, but it's not. It can be really, really frustrating, and it's very common for people who are attention deficit to also suffer from anxiety and depression because the world's not made for people who are attention deficit. It can be hard to feel like you belong in a lot of circles when you have ADHD because your brain does work differently. You've probably heard going around terms like neurotypical versus neurodiverse. Neurodiversity is when the structure of your brain is physically different from the norm of a person. So things like ADHD, OCD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, you'd be considered neurodiverse if you have those, because that shows that your brain is built different. You're built different. The way that you take in information and perceive the world is very physically different from people who are neurotypical. And if you're like me and you get scared when you hear new terms to categorize people, there's nothing wrong with being either of them. They're totally fine. If you think there's something wrong with either of them, you're a butt face, and I will clap your cheeks. It's just how people are made. And I think for some people, I personally do enjoy having labels because it helps keep me organized. It helps me to see things more clearly. So for me, labels like neurodivergent, neurodiverse are helpful for me to understand and for me to sort of plan and accommodate and just know how to act around people. For me, that's helpful. For other people, that may not be helpful, and that's totally fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Oh, I should specify before carrying on too far, I'm not a doctor. If you can believe it, I don't have any formal study in psychology or mental health. I just have a lot of anecdotal experience and a genuine interest in mental health and all the different things that can go wrong and change in a person's brain. I find it very fascinating, so I've studied up on it to that extent, but don't take anything I say as gospel. In this series, I will say things that are incorrect, and that's okay, because I'll be learning. I think I have stuff that is worth saying, and maybe even worth hearing, and people might be able to get stuff out of that. If you identify with me on any of my diagnoses and you think that you might be going down that road, then reach out to a professional to get a proper diagnosis. Don't diagnose yourself. Good word, I'm going to make an entire video about why that enrages me to no end. If you think you got something, go and confirm it. Once people receive actual diagnoses for their illnesses, it can lower their stress related to that illness by as much as 80%. So for no other reason, just to make your life easier, if you think you have something, get tested. Disclaimer out of the way, covering my bahungus, social anxiety. What? A guy who spends his whole days talking to himself in his office and never leaving his home is scared of people? Who would have thunk it? This is something that I've gotten a lot better at over the last year or so, and that's through very deliberate work done in therapy. I recently switched therapists, and the entire type of therapy that I'm getting. My last bit of therapy with my other therapist, we focused a lot on social anxiety, and that's really why I'm doing a lot better with it now. I'm still not good at it, social stuff, but I'm way better than I used to be. And if you don't know what social anxiety is in a clinical sense, largely it comes down to the fear of being judged. And I didn't think that I had a fear of being judged because I tend to be very much just live my own life. And if you have a problem with it, that's unfortunate for you. But even having a blasé attitude about it, it doesn't change the fact that it doesn't change the way that I internalize these kinds of things. Difficulty eating around people, I found, is actually a very common symptom of social anxiety. But for me, I'm totally fine to eat around people because it's just me and the food in a romantic little moment. People don't exist. It's just a Big Mac. It's just a Dave single from Wendy's. My social anxiety was very, very serious, and in many ways it still is. I don't think it would be an over-exaggeration to describe it as debilitating. I don't answer the phone, ever. My bank called me 5 times consecutively a couple weeks ago. I didn't even bother checking the voicemail. I could be losing all my money, but I would rather that than talk to a representative who gets paid to help me. I have spent excess money and time in the past specifically to avoid talking to people. I avoid leaving my house. I avoid making new friends and meeting new people because... And that's just how I've always been. Really. Like, I'm an introvert, which is not the same thing as being socially anxious. They do complement each other well, but you can be extroverted and also have social anxiety, which is a really sucky situation. Introversion and social anxiety do, however, complement each other well. They facilitate each other very well. So for me, I am walking a balancing act between not pushing myself to social burnout, but also trying to push myself enough that I'm not socially withdrawn. Social anxiety is the reason that at my church I haven't gotten involved at all outside of regular Sunday service for the last 13 years until they had a job opening, and now I work there. They had to pay me to talk to people. And I remember when I worked a retail job just before YouTube, that was not a good decision. I didn't have any diagnosis of social anxiety. I had assumed that I was just shy. And shyness on its own, you can power through and get over. Shyness isn't necessarily social anxiety. It's just being more timid and not as outspoken. But I was having, basically from clock in to clock out, I was having panic attacks all day. And I would come home just absolutely exhausted and burnt out, and my brain was just fried because I gave everything I had into not just breaking down in the middle of my shifts. I was under just the more stress than I think I've ever felt, because in my brain, when I'm around people, I'm in danger. You know, I'm not safe unless I'm alone or with very old and very trusted friends. And come the Christmas season, because it was a toy store, so Christmas season was a little uppity, 30 hours a week of just either coming up to a panic attack, having a panic attack, or coming down from a panic attack, which anybody who's had panic attacks can tell you, all three of those stages are just exhausting. And it would get so bad that at certain points, I would reach such a high in my panic attack that it just snaps. And I'm suddenly just super calm. The threshold, the capacity I have to register stress and understand stress, it just overflowed. And I just couldn't feel anything emotionally. I just became dead and just going through the motions. It was like a kind of comfort in there, because then I'm not stressed anymore because I'm not feeling it anymore. But those were days where I realized that retail's probably not my best part-time job choice. And my job at the church is with a small team of people who I love, and they're very, very good people. And if I'm not working with them, then I'm just working alone on stuff. And everybody at the church is so nice. They're all so supportive and kind and fun, and they're just amazing people. Maybe that's another thing I'll do a video about. I should be writing these down, actually. These are good video ideas. And social anxiety actually bled in pretty well to one of my most recent diagnoses, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And it is not what you probably think it is. OCD is an anxiety disorder. It's a very bad anxiety disorder. OCD, it's more than clicking a pen or washing your hands frequently. I think people understand the way that it presents, but they don't understand the underlying reasons for it. So a big part of obsessive compulsive disorder is intrusive thoughts. An intrusive thought is just a random thought that pops into your head that shouldn't be there. It otherwise wouldn't be there. You wouldn't think it on your own. Like if you've ever been sitting in class and you're like, your brain just goes, ooh, let's get up and dance on the desk. And you're like, what the heck, dude? Shut up. That would be really weird. Things like that, or just this sudden urge when you walk past a fire alarm to pull it, even though you know that's a bad idea, and your brain's like, let's do it. Let's do it now. Those kinds of things are like intrusive thoughts. With OCD, the intrusive thoughts become a lot less funny. For a lot of people with OCD, it's not that they want to have things organized, which is what a lot of people think. It's not that they want to have things organized. They just want to have things in a particular way that is the same, it's familiar, predictable, and safe. OCD is having your survival instincts on overdrive. All you're ever thinking about is safety. What can I do to be safe here? Am I in danger? So if someone with OCD organizes some knickknacks on a windowsill and you switch them, and that person with OCD gets angry, they're not angry because you touch their stuff necessarily. It's not a matter that they just want it to be that way. It's, since it's not that way, this place is no longer a safe environment. I feel like I'm in danger here. For an example, there was one time I was home alone, and I was walking down the hall, and there's a picture on our wall, and I noticed that it was crooked in a way that it isn't usually. And in the first intrusive thought that came into my head was that, oh, picture's crooked. My entire family is dead, and a policeman is on his way to tell me. And suddenly my whole life is going to be upended. And I'm pretty sure that's also a diagnostic criteria, is that the triggers in OCD are, and the self-medication, which is what hand washing, even numbered volume, like things like that, that's all self-medicating. It's not related to the fear. I see that a picture is not straight. That has nothing to do with my family's safety, but straightening that picture is how I was able to garner some relief from that fear and anxiety. It's a strange thing, and I'm still learning about it. It's still a new thing for me. So there's better ways to explain everything that I've said, and I'll get to it eventually. I'm going to do a deep dive on all of these diagnoses eventually, I think. Basically, the organizing things by color and having even numbers of everything and taking the correct amount of steps with the correct foot pattern on sidewalk tiles, that's all forms of self-medicating in OCD. It's a way of relieving stress from the intrusive thoughts that come in, because I can't do anything if my family gets in a car accident and I'll die. But what I can control is if I eat the red Smarties last. I can't control if my best friend's house is on fire and he's trapped inside, but I can control what my bedroom floor looks like. It's about gaining a little bit of relief, but also it reinforces the intrusive thoughts. So then if I get the same thought again, if I see a crooked picture and I think my family's dead and I don't fix it, then it's going to cause that much more stress for every time that I did fix it and everything was fine. This time I'm doing it differently, and then my stress level will just peak. There were so many times as a child in elementary, I would come home first, be home alone for a while. There were so many times that I was genuinely surprised to see my mom come home, because I had these intrusive thoughts and they were so powerful that I just believed them. Like, yeah, no, my mom's dead. That's just how it is. She's not going to come home. And there were so many days. I would honestly say most of them in elementary where I just was genuinely surprised when I saw her car roll up. It's not a fun, quirky kind of mental illness. It's a really upsetting and difficult to live with kind of thing. There are blessings that come with OCD. OCD people have a great attention to detail, mainly because they're so practiced at it, because anytime there's something even slightly off from how it should be, they know. I once went on a 3-week vacation with my family, and when I came back, I have this little trilobite fossil, just a little slab of rock with a trilobite on it on a stand. And when we got home, I noticed that it had been turned, I think, 2 centimeters. It had been rotated 2 centimeters to the left. And I noticed that, and my immediate thought was, there's someone in the house. I'm not safe anymore. And then my following thought was, he's probably downstairs. He's probably already killed everyone else. So I went downstairs fully expecting to see a dude standing over my family's corpses with a bloody knife in hand. And then I was thinking I would have to fight for my life. And it was just my mom unpacking some of the leftover food that we had. OCD is not cool. And now let's get to the big one. The big D. The Mr. Sad. The one that is kind of trendy right now. Depression. I have struggled with depression for most of my life. I was suicidal at the age of 9, and the age of 9 is sort of where I mark the start of my depression in a clinical sense, only because that was the first time that I had legitimately considered suicide when I was 9 years old. There's a lot of reasons for it to have started so young, and I'll get into those more on a dedicated episode, because there's a lot to unpack. It's very likely that I was clinically diagnosably depressed closer to age 8, maybe even 7, but 9 is the first time in my life where I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to feel like this. I don't think other kids feel this sad, because I feel like most of them wouldn't be here if they did. For a brief overview of the stuff that was going on, as a kid, it was mostly external stuff. You can have internal and external reasons for depression. These days, it's more of a mix, but back then it was very much an external thing. A brief overview is just a lack of satisfaction with my home life and a lot of bullying at school. You know, even as a kid, I think other kids realized that I'm the sexual icon to define a generation, and they just couldn't handle it. No, it was mostly just girls picking on me for my weight, my appearance, my flamboyant nature. It was mostly verbal, but there was also a lot of physical abuse at the hands of my contemporaries, my peers. And it was a daily thing. It was a daily thing for a long time. And from grades 1 to 3, I didn't have any friends either. I had absolutely nobody. It was the only social interactions that I had was with my abusers, which I'm sure has left some scar tissue. Elementary school as a whole, I often categorize as probably the tougher years. It was hard. It's a God-given miracle that I'm here today. That depression and suicidal ideation, I carried that on my own, completely alone. Nobody knew that I was struggling with anything in any way for the next 7 years about. I handled it completely alone, which is not a good thing to do. You can't handle this on your own. Your brain is the reason it's happening. Don't trust it to make it better. I carried that for 7 years, completely alone, told absolutely no one, until I was talking with a friend one day, and I had mentioned to her that I was probably depressed when I was a kid, when I was younger, and later that night things got really dark, really desperate, and thanks to a brief moment of lucidity, I was able to call her on the phone and tell her, like, yeah, that never stopped. I'm still going through what I was going through then, and she was very, very good. She made sure I was safe, and we resolved to the next morning talk to a guidance counselor. So I talked to my guidance counselor, and he got me onto the Alex bus. Is a thing we have. I don't know how widespread it is. Basically, it's just a doctor on wheels. The lady there, I forget what her name was, but she was super cool, and she suggested that I go to therapy. And she suggested that I go to therapy, but also tell my parents what's going on. And that was in high school, where I first opened up to anybody about what I'd been going through since I was not even in double digits in age. I'm intentionally trying not to divulge too much, because I think that this deserves a video of its own, but I also just want to explain and sort of let people know a bit more about what it's like to live with depression. It's not a matter of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. If someone tells you that it is, spit in their mouth and make them swallow it. Sadness is more something that you can eventually, once you've felt it through in a healthy way, then you have to pick yourself up by your bootstraps, by your little booties. But depression is not sadness. Depression is an illness. It's debilitating, it's crippling, and it's very difficult to live with. And I'm still struggling with it daily. The suicidal thoughts, they are not nearly as common as they were when I was a kid, and then a teenager, and then a young adult. And I really think that with my current therapist, I'm on the right track to getting somewhere, but it's been a long road. It's been a tough journey. And what's super fun is that ADD, social anxiety, OCD, those are all contributors to depression. Comorbid, they call it. They all work really well at keeping me down. And any time that I miss an upload, it's because of depression. In some way or another, it's through depression. Lethargy, inability to focus and concentrate. It all comes back to that. It's just depression giving me a good right spanking. And I'm fighting it daily. And most days I lose. But there are some days that I win. And I just really got to focus on prioritizing the victories over the failures. The losses, failures. Words are important. Pick your words carefully, especially when talking about yourself. Even if you don't think it has an impact on you, it does. I'm really working hard at it. And I'm making progress. Miles from where I want to be, but I'm headed in that direction, which I think is a really good start. So with all that out of the way, I wanted to touch also in this little pilot episode of ours, I wanted to touch on how mental health has really directed my mission statement and directed this channel. Even though I haven't really talked about mental health in a very dedicated way in any of my videos, mental health is the reason that I'm here on YouTube. Mental health is the reason that I do what I do in the ways that I do it. My entire goal with this channel with doing YouTube, with making videos, all of it. My entire goal with this is to give other people the thing that I struggle to give myself, and that is happiness. That is reprieve. People with mental health issues and people just going through the regular valleys of life. Those are the people that I'm trying to reach because I want to help people who have struggled in similar ways to me. YouTubers before me have saved me unequivocally. Without YouTube and without YouTubers, I probably wouldn't be here today. YouTubers like Markiplier. I mean, Markiplier is basically all that I watch. And like, if you ever thought like, wow, this guy copies Markiplier a bit, probably. He's my main inspiration, and he's basically the only guy that I watch on YouTube now, and occasionally some Game Grumps if I'm feeling extra saucy. Without, and I'm not trying to be a fanboy here, without Markiplier making just silly videos on gaming, I'd be dead. And I can say that with some pretty reasonable confidence. I wouldn't be here without other YouTubers doing what I'm doing now. And that's why I'm doing this. I want to be that for other people. I want to help people. I want to offer some respite for people's suffering. If only for 20 minutes in a day, give people something that they can use to take their minds off of all the things going wrong. I'm here because I have a deep love for people. Even though I'm scared of them, I love people. And this is one of the ways that I know how to care for people. It's one of the only ways that I know. Because this is the primary way that I felt cared for in my life. Make no mistake, no matter how silly or slapdash some of these videos may seem or come out as, it's entirely done with the intention of being a source of comfort for people, being a source of letting people know that they're loved. When I started doing the I love you, that was a joke at first. Like hanging up on like a policeman or something. It's like, all right, love you, bye. That was a joke the first bit. But then I started thinking, like, I didn't get told that people loved me nearly enough when I was a kid. And I think that there's a lot of people who still don't hear that enough now. And I don't know that I fully do, but I mean, my mom's putting in work. She cares for me. There are people that don't get to hear that they're loved in a day. And that's why I say it, because I want you to know that I love you. If there's no one else in your life that has the stones to say it, I'll be that person, at least until you get something more tactile, someone closer. Mental health is really the driving force behind this channel, and I think that's one blessing that I can count, having lived a life of mental illness, is that my resolve has hardened exponentially, I think. And on the days where I'm just really sad and in a dark place, I can remember that's why I do this. That's why I'm pushing for YouTube, is because I think I can be a positive force on the internet and in the world. I'm here doing this because I don't want people to feel like I do. I don't want people to be like me. At least in how they treat themselves and how they feel. Mental health, even if that as a topic isn't at the forefront of my videos every time, it is the driving force behind them every single time. I just want to be for other people what YouTubers have been for me. And if I can help people in a similar way, even a little bit, even just a casual distraction from the things that you're going through, I want to be that for you. Anything that I can do to help you get through your struggles, I want to do it. This is what has been done for me, so I want to give this back. Well, that got a little bit more impassioned than I intended, but I think that was still good. Transparency is a big thing for me, so I think it's good that if you didn't know why I'm doing this before, now you do. So back on topic, Mental Health Mondays. With Mental Health Mondays, what I'm really trying to accomplish with this is, first off, bringing mental health issues and awareness to the forefront. I'll still try to keep it light, keep it fun where I can, but of course having that certain amount of reverence and respect for the subject matter. And I also want to try and educate for people who may not have a full picture of what a lot of these mental illnesses are like and what it's like to live with mental illness. Because there's a lot of people, God bless them, who don't know what it's like to be depressed or be scared in this clinical sense, or to be attention deficit. And again, not a doctor, but I think I have some insight just through experience, and I would like to share my experiences with you. And I also just want to let people know that they're not alone. You're not alone if you struggle. You're never alone. And I know some people, you get this twisted little sense of selfishness where it's like, no, my suffering is very special. Mine is unique. And I know that people think like that because I've thought like that before. Growing up, I hated that, to hear that you're not alone, because it internalized itself as you are just like everyone else, which you are unique. Don't get me wrong. People call you a snowflake as an insult. Kick him in the grundle. We're all individuals. We're all unique. There are people like us everywhere, but there's nobody who's just like you. Nobody who's just like me. There's power in that. But in knowing that you're not alone, that means that there are other people who can relate to you, who can understand your experiences, and maybe people who have solutions for you to help you not have to identify with them in that way anymore. Even if you want to be, you're not alone. And I really want to let people know that, because it's good to not be alone. And that appears to be all that I have to talk about for the pilot. So, cool, we started a new thing. I am going to do my very best to keep this up every single week. If I don't have a specific topic, then it might just be a short little weekly review just of how my life has been living with mental illness. Maybe I've won, maybe I've lost some stuff. It'll be whatever, but it'll always be about mental health. It'll always be honest and open, and you will always be welcome here. If you have any questions about me personally or mental health in general, if I feel like I have the capacity to answer them, then I will. So any questions you have, leave them in the comments and I will respond to each and every one. And if your question is such that I have a lot to say on it, or I feel like it's just a very, very good question that more people should hear the answer to, then who knows, maybe I'll answer in a video. You'll get a little creature feature. Wouldn't that be nice? So any questions at all, leave them down. And if you see somebody that you feel like needs a little bit of support, show them some love. That's what we're about here. We're a community of friends and family. We're here to care about each other. Nothing more, nothing less. And if you or anyone you know is struggling, I've left some resources down in the description below. Check them out. You're worth it. All right, that wasn't too bad. I think I kept mostly on track for most of it-ish. Well, thank you guys for watching the first episode of Mental Health Mondays. Why on a Monday? Because alliteration sells, baby. If you'd like to see more of this and more of my funny haha gaming videos, then subscribe. But regardless, of course, and as always, I love you. And I'll see you next week. Ooh, that is cold.